Thank you all for being here with us this evening. I want to introduce our interim chancellor of UW-Madison, someone who was taking a leave temporarily, or maybe not temporarily, from his position as the Dean of the College of Letters and Science, Eric Wilcox, who has been a dear, dear friend and supporter of the work we do at the Center for Healthy Minds. Eric is an astronomer by training and has really played an enormous role in shaping the amazing work that we and so many others are doing at our university. So Eric, please come.
Thank you, Richie. It is, what a crowd. You managed to bring them out. So thank you for all of you for being here tonight for this fantastic event. I must begin, however, maybe not however, with a public service announcement. Right, and that is, this is not a retirement party. Just so that is perfectly clear. This is a celebration of the first 50 years of a remarkable career. And as the chancellor here, the interim chancellor here, I'm hoping there's many, many more. But before I came over here, I actually had a meeting with a couple of my former students who had gotten to that point in their careers where they were sort of asking me for advice and wisdom, just recently gotten tenure. And what I encouraged them to do, but they were already doing it, was I said to think big, to be bold, to tackle the questions that no one else is tackling, to try to seek those answers to the very difficult questions, and to be remarkably creative. That was my advice to them, and they're doing that on their own. But I reflect on that because as the chancellor of an institution like this, we look for faculty who are willing to do that, who want to take that bold step, who want to be and have a tremendous impact. And no one has had that kind of impact like Richie has. And I want you, and as we're reflecting on this, I want to say, how bold is it to ask the question of what it means for us as human beings to flourish? To just ask that question is a bold step. But then to think about what will it take to answer that question requires innovation and creativity and leadership. And to do something that we often talk about at an institution like this, and to think in a way that is in an interdisciplinary approach, to bring together fundamental biology, to bring together neuroplasticity with contemplative traditions. That is bold and that is innovative. And Richie has done that. And the Center for Healthy Minds has been a remarkable asset, not just to this community and this university, but to the world as a whole. And there's lots of statistics. I'll just mention a couple. The amount of research funding, something that we like to measure as administrators, has been remarkable. Well over $100 million of research grants to the Center for Healthy Minds. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that to lives touched. A course, The Art of Human Flourishing, Art and Science of Human Flourishing. Well over 2,000 students have taken that class in the last few years here at UW-Madison. And it's a class that is now being taught at how many different universities across the country? I know you mentioned University of Virginia.
Yeah, not sure, but we're trying to spread.
We're spreading the gospel, as they might say. But then not just to do that work, not just to do that fundamental science, to be on the cutting edge and the leading edge, not just to deliver a curriculum for our students, but then to make the decision and to follow the path to get that science in the hands of the average human. And that encompasses something that here at the University of Wisconsin is so core to our DNA, the Wisconsin idea. The notion that the work that we do here, in its original framing, the beneficent influence of the University of Wisconsin should be felt in every household in the state. And we've expanded that to globally. Richie and his work is an embodiment of the Wisconsin idea. Thank you for that. And that is what he's already done. But as I said, that's just the first 50 years. We are in, as you all well know, in a moment, I think, in our history. And it's a moment that's being driven in many ways by technology, artificial intelligence, to put a label on it, that is asking us to ask a very fundamental question of what does it really mean to be human, and who we really are, and how do we express ourselves. And as we on this campus and then on other campuses around the world begin to deeply engage in that quantitative side of artificial intelligence and how it drives discovery and its implications, we have created a whole new college in that spirit, the new College of Computing and Artificial Intelligence. But in that moment, one of the most critical relationships between that college and that investment in AI is connecting it with the Center for Healthy Minds. And I was just talking with Richie backstage about his relationship with our new dean of that college to understand how can we bring these two things together. How can we, in this era that is dominated so much by technology and it eats away at everything we do, how can we remind ourselves and ask that fundamental question of what it means to flourish as humans? And so, Richie, it is an honor and a privilege to be here, to be able to give a few introductory remarks. It is a real honor to call you a friend and a colleague. What you mean to this university, to the state, to the world is absolutely incredible. Thank you for all that you have done. I look forward to the next 1, 2, 3, 4 chapters that you have yet to write. And I look very much forward to the conversation that we will see here tonight. And Simon, thank you for being here to help us lead that conversation. Thank you, and let's enjoy the evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Interim Chancellor Wilcox, for those beautiful remarks. It's really such a delight to be here with you all, celebrating 50 years of work on flourishing. We're going to embarrass Richie all night. This will be great. And we'll explore together this topic, the past, the present, and the future. But really, Richie, tonight is a love letter from all of us to you.
Yeah.
For all that you've done for the field, for all that you've done for all of us and all of our lives, all the lives that you've touched with this work.
Is it okay if I cry?
Yes.
We're joined here and online by many who have been inspired by you and your work, friends and family, supporters, students, and colleagues, many who organized tonight, who made tonight possible. And you're also joined by two of your dearest friends who have been working shoulder to shoulder with you in this work, building a field of contemplative science and bridging science and practice for so many years. It's really special. I'm going to read this so I don't misrepresent. Roshi Joan Halifax is a Zen Buddhist teacher, medical anthropologist, author, activist, and the founder and abbot of the Upaya Zen Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. A pioneer in contemplative end-of-life care, she has spent more than 50 years bringing compassion to the dying and training clinicians in care of the dying and those with catastrophic illness. Sona Dimidjian is a clinical psychologist, professor of psychology and neuroscience, and director of the Crown Institute at the University of Colorado Boulder, and chair of the Mind and Life Institute Board of Directors. Her work has reshaped how we understand and support mental health and wellness with contemplative practices, including research on preventing depression among new and expectant mothers, promoting healthy body image among girls and young women, and cultivating compassion and dignity among educators. We're so lucky you all are here.
Oh, thank you, Simon.
Joining us. Yeah. And we thought, since we're talking about the cultivation of flourishing, Roshi Joan, if you're willing to lead a short practice for us, that would be sweet.
Thank you. I'm happy to do that. Yeah. Back there in the green room, we had moments of upregulation, of encountering each other, but we also could hear there was some excitement out there in the audience. And not to abate the joy or the excitement, but just putting your feet on the floor Really that sense of groundedness. And breath deep in the body. And remember really why we're here. And bringing to mind this work of unfolding flourishing as the path and the outcome of mitigating suffering. And the sense of deep appreciation for Richie. Who has many hands, many eyes in his students and colleagues. All of us. So much he's brought together in this one life. And a sense of deep appreciation and gratefulness. Thank you, Richie. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Roshi.
Thank you, Roshi Joan. "50 years ago, Richie, when you were having a graduation party right about now, the idea that you could study meditation in a lab or bring it to the clinic was fringe, to say the least. So I'm hoping you three can take us back. When did your paths first cross? What was the world like for this work when you three met?"
Do you want to start?
You can start, Roshi.
Okay. Well, I think we met in Delhi,
Yes.
of all places. We met in Delhi, and we got particularly close in a train station in Delhi. When Cliff Saran, who is in this audience, I think, right, and a whole gaggle of us were guarding, this extraordinary amount of equipment that Cliff had brought together in order to measure whatever's happening in the brains of great yogis in the Himalayas, so to speak. And I just remember Richie and I looking at each other. We had never really, had much contact with each other prior to that. And both of our eyebrows raised up, in this moment of extreme but silent humor. Mm-hmm. Like, what in the hell? When we were surrounded by 1,000 people who wanted any little part of that equipment. Thank you, Cliff, so much. And this gaggle of mind and life people immediately bonded, and we became friends forever. I mean, that was a long time ago, not as long as some of the relationships that, have shown through the net of mind and life. But, and there began this journey of friendship that was really brought into life through our mutual friend, the late Francisco Varela, whom we adored. A remarkable human being.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Who was with us on that trip?
And he was, as were a few other rascals aside from Cliff, and you. And it was a kind of impossible and wonderful situation. And we stayed in Kashmir cottages with Nari Rinpoche, His Holiness's brother. And it was very much, in the sort of cozy years of His Holiness. Danny was there too, of course, Dan Goldman, in the very cozy years where we would hang out in His Holiness's living room, and His Holiness would just be slouched in a big chair. And, he just would absolutely take, I'm sorry to put it this way, this is a terrible way to put it, in the discussions that were unfolding between neuroscientists, philosophers, and contemplatives, His Holiness took no prisoners. He won every discourse that was going on. He had the most penetrating mind. And he would just push for, what was actual, what was true, what was real, even if it meant do you remember sometimes the sort of canon of Tibetan teachings would have to be changed in part because of the discoveries in neuroscience and biology? Those were the years, really precious. And we traveled those years together as colleagues. But one of the things that stands out for me was Richie's joy. I think many of you know it. One of the most loving human beings I've ever met, and also a person who understands the merit of rigor, whose integrity is impeccable, and yet is able to ride in the waters of complexity in a way that I think few people I've ever encountered can actually manage in such waters. So I love you.
I love you.
Obviously. Serious fan. And, also, Richie, one of the things I know Sona feels this, Cisco felt it deeply. Being a friend of yours, it was something that was extremely unique, because the kind of respect, but the beauty you brought into the friendships. We know that, Sona and I do, many people in this audience, we know it. And I saw it between you and Cisco, but particularly between you and His Holiness. Yeah. Anyway, that was how
Good one.
we met.
Yes. Sona, how about you?
Oh, I can say how I met Sona for the first time. I met Sona, I think we met at the Mind and Life Summer Research Institute. And I'll just share this story from my perspective, and then Sona can share it. But these were the early days of contemplative neuroscience. And I knew nothing about Sona at that time. She was an assistant professor. And there was a symposium on self-report measures of mindfulness. And some people who were developing those measures and who were prominent were part of this symposium. And I was like taking rigor in those days probably a little bit too extremely. And I was really, some of you in the audience know this, bashing self-report measures. Because their complexity and maybe lack of real validity. And Sona was chairing this symposium. And of course, now we develop our own self-report measures, but Sona was chairing this symposium, and I went up to someone and I said, who is that person? Because she was doing such a remarkable, skillful job in navigating these complexities and was so wise, and also was so young at that time. She was an assistant professor, and just doing it with such grace. And that was my first encounter with Sona. And then the other seminal experience that I've had with Sona, which maybe she can say more about, is we ended up together with my son Seth, in just the three of us, in a tiny, falling apart taxi that drove us from Dharamsala, India to Delhi, that took about 14 hours in the middle of the night.
And with a huge hole in the bottom of the
hole.
car, covered with a small carpet.
Sona was sitting in the back with my son, and I was sitting in the front. And the driver was about 18 years old. He didn't speak any English, but every now and then he'd be going along and he'd say, "Oh shit, oh shit." That's what I remember.
Another bonding experience.
Another bonding experience, yes.
Really. We had to keep each other awake throughout
Yes.
the night so someone could also keep an eye on the road. I remember both of those times, and in truth, Richie, I actually met you, I would say, the year before that, and that was in a space much like this, and I was sitting in the audience, like all of you are here, in a large hall in Washington, D.C., at the first Mind and Life dialogue that I attended. And I was at that point just finishing graduate school. It was a year before I had the good fortune of meeting you both, Richie and Roshi, for real at the Mind and Life Summer Research Institute. And I felt it was like being captivated by the science that you were sharing on the stage and the contemplative wisdom that was integrated with scientific inquiry. And I remember, I didn't know anyone else in the auditorium. There were, again, I think probably thousands of people. And just having this sense of like a future horizon that was opening. And I didn't really know what it entailed, but there was something that was calling, I will say, to me in the possibility of this work and what you were sharing on that stage. And, throughout, and so then the next year I started as assistant professor, and I think to go to your question, Simon, doing this work was super fringy. And I was where I am still, University of Colorado Boulder, and doing research on mindfulness-based cognitive therapy with women during pregnancy and the postpartum period. And so I was, driving around Colorado, and I didn't have a center, or I didn't even have a very big lab. It was me and like a couple of courageous undergraduate volunteers. And I had this very old, you'll remember the car, Roshi,
I know.
very old Subaru Legacy. And I would just cram all these yoga mats and zafus and zabutons in the car and drive to obstetrics clinics to seek partnerships so that we could do the research that we wanted to do. And I heard many times from the physicians and the nurses some version of like, oh yeah, we heard about you. You're that professor from Boulder. It's all candles and sandals up there, honey. I don't think that's gonna work with our patients. And I was able to say, like, I don't know if it's going to work with your patients either. That's why we want to do the research. And even though the practices that we wanted to study were seen as fringe, the tools of science were not. They were rigorous. We were doing randomized controlled trials and careful assessments of things that really mattered. Like, did depression come back for women who had long histories of recurrent depression? And so that work was so important in what we found, in that a very brief program with actually quite modest home practice actually helped prevent the return of depression at a really critical time in women's lives and in their families' lives. And so doing that work was so important and so rewarding. And it was also hard to be driving all over Colorado in that, Subaru Legacy. And I don't think, Richie, that I would have done that work had I not had the inspiration and the confidence from the path that you set forth. And so I feel both within my own life and in all of the lives this work has touched, that incredible gratitude.
Yeah.
And I will say also, to add what you shared, Roshi, and the qualities of Richie, I will also say an incredible generosity, because I also remember just happening upon one another. I think maybe in the Newark airport on the way to a Mind and Life meeting, and I had just gotten reviews from the National Institute of Health grant that funded some of that early work, and Richie said, "Oh yeah, let's sit down. I'll go through the critiques with you right there, just like in the, at the gate," which was instrumental in ways that have continued to ripple and benefit. So thank you for your care and generosity.
You all mentioned Mind and Life a number of times. It seems like that's been a super important organization for moving from candles and sandals. Is that what it is?
That's great.
Sandals and
to
candles.
a real contemplative science. Would you share some about? Some people might be less familiar.
Sure. First, Sona is now the chair of the board of Mind and Life, which we're really happy about. Mind and Life was started in 1987 by the Dalai Lama, Adam Engel, and Francisco Varela. Francisco Varela, for those of you who don't know, was a Chilean biologist who was really instrumental in starting the whole field of contemplative science and contemplative neuroscience in particular. And he was also a very dedicated practitioner himself and was just inspiring in so many different ways. And one of the ways is in his dedication to practice while also being a rigorous scientist. So Francisco Varela was the scientist, Adam Engel is a businessman, and the two of them with the Dalai Lama began this organization. And in its very early stages, Roshi Joan and I and a number of other characters who some of you may have heard of, one of whom is Daniel Goleman, the other is John Kabat-Zinn. We were all on the board of directors at the same time. And it was quite an amazing journey that we all had. And those were really formative activities and experiences. And one of the seminal things that the Mind and Life Institute does is it holds this Summer Research Institute in June of every year. It's a 5-day meeting, workshop/retreat. And it really was the very first time in my career where scientists got together and they not only talked, but they also put their butts on the cushion and actually practiced. And integrating that in a unified way embodied a different way of actually doing the science. And so it wasn't just that this was a group that had similar scientific interests, but through the way we were navigating together, we were developing new ways of actually working together. And that was really important, I think. And many young people who attended a Mind and Life Summer Institute, I think many share the same sense that this was a community that they felt they can be themselves in, they can be authentic. It was just liberating, and it was something that very few of these people had in their home institutions. And so this became a really important community for them as they were developing their scientific careers.
Yeah, I think there are quite a few of us in this room whose lives have been changed because of Mind and Life, including Richie's and Cliff's and mine and Sona's and others. And actually, the first meeting was in '87. There was an interesting prehistory to that first meeting. And now we're in, the post-Varela years, if you will. And in those...
the post-Dalai Lama
and
years.
the post-Dalai Lama years. Yeah. Institutions change through time. And, in part, Sona and I were speaking, and Richie and I have touched in about this, how important it is both to look deeply at the roots of the vision and mission of Mind and Life, and how many people's lives changed as a result of it, including the lives of patients, and the lives of educators, and the lives of clinicians, not just those of us who've been part of that mandala. And then the question always comes, at a certain point in the formation and unfolding of an institution. And I think this is true, also of this extraordinary university. What will really serve the future? And, to ask that question, of hallowed institutions is pretty threatening because we like to sit on some of our laurels and then forget others of our laurels. And I think what's important right now is, Richie and Sona, I can say, are people who've actualized the kind of courage to actually ask that question. How will science and neuroscience change in a future that is touched not only by ethical perspectives that are reflected, in working with human subjects, but also in the world of AI? How will our relationship between our understanding of consciousness change in relation to the technologies that are actually changing how people's minds operate? So we're at a kind of frontier today that I think is really valuable for us to take seriously. And, I think it's one where there is a lot of the good kind of not knowing, where the important thing is to ask the brave and important questions. It's something both of you have done, by the way. And we'll see what the road ahead will be for Mind and Life and for this extraordinary university community.
There's so many threads I could see. This is a 7-hour event, is that right? I want to come back to the AI question. But maybe before that, we can set a little bit of groundwork just around the term flourishing. That's the theme for tonight. Would love to hear from each of you how you think of that term from your various perspectives, and if there are moments or people that you've encountered in your lives that really embody that.
Well, I'd like to say a few things. I think it depends on the point of view. And the point of view is, are you speaking from the lab's point of view? Are you speaking from the point of view of the clinic's point of view, or the point of view of the practitioner's point of view? And I think there are 3 different answers, my hunch is. I think from the lab's point of view is, this is something you can measure, actually. And that's extraordinary. From the point of view of the clinic and the clinician is, it is something that represents the mitigation of suffering. And that is also extraordinarily valuable. And then from the point of view of practice, I think it's a little different. I think it relates to what we could say it means to be free. And I think the endeavor that Richie and Sona have been engaged in, and I as a wing person, so to speak, is to somehow braid those 3 landscapes into a rich but single landscape. Yeah.
Wow.
That's beautifully put.
Well, what is flourishing?
Well, I want to actually respond to one thing you said earlier and to now, because Roshi, your wisdom and your teaching is so profound, and you, for me, like both through visits with you at Upaya and principally through the Summer Research Institute, you have really profoundly guided this field through your teaching. And the practice, the integration of science, research, and practice at the Summer Research Institute that you spoke about, Richie, those were years guided by you and and Sharon Salzberg. And so just the profound teaching that you offered, and also the really embodiment also of friendship between you and Sharon, I think has had incredible influence. And we have benefited greatly. And I agree completely with what you just shared about flourishing and the integration of those three. I think what I would add actually even a fourth context there, which is within the classroom. And, we've been fortunate at our university to be able to be part of this, growing community of universities teaching the Art and Science of Human Flourishing course. And I had the opportunity to teach kind of our small seminar version of that in the fall of 2024, and which was a class we entitled Flourishing, Belonging, and Liberation. And in that class, two things actually the students really resonated with in terms of what is flourishing. One was a reminder from some of the work of Robin Wall-Kemmerer that all flourishing is mutual.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not something that just I do or you do, like we flourish together or we don't flourish. And so in that sense, all of flourishing is contextual. It's situated within our relationships, and that really resonated with students. And then the other aspect is that flourishing does not mean being free of challenge. And that, in fact, students in research that we've done, they talk about flourishing with positive emotion like joy and happiness and contentment, and with learning and growing. And there's often struggle. That's not always easy. So one of the you said examples of flourishing actually came to mind was that fall. I taught class on the night of the election, and it was an intense moment. And the students in that class, a class that was grounded in the art and science of human flourishing, created the context of the container where students who represented very different views on the present and the future in our world could come together and have a sense of our shared humanity. And that was a really profound experience in the classroom that was, facilitated by all of the work that's happened here and the container of that class.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
So what's flourishing to you?
There are many ways to approach this, as Roshi has so beautifully suggested in the different contexts. One way to think about it is that it's a kind of fundamental okayedness. And it's where anything can come down the pike, and things do come down the pike. So to quote the bumper sticker, stuff happens, and we can't buffer ourselves from it. But a sense that one has the resources to navigate those challenges, those adversities, those complexities. So I think that's one way to talk about it that I think is really important. In Sona, your comment also brings to mind something that we talk a lot about these days, which is a kind of slogan that we have adopted. Really, it's a data-driven slogan. I love data-driven slogans. And the slogan is, flourishing is contagious.
Yeah.
It really is. And we all know that. If we're around people who are just exuding flourishing, you'll feel better in their presence. And all of us have experienced that. And so I think that's so important. And it's really important to understand that flourishing doesn't mean being happy all the time. Not at all. And I know in Simon's preparation for this, I think you asked that question very explicitly. Yes, we can flourish in many, and really in any situation. And Roshi has spent an extraordinary part of her life with people who are dying. And I think that one of the things she's helped us appreciate through that work is that many of the people that she was sitting with as they were dying were flourishing.
Yeah.
And in the book that Cortland Dahl and I wrote that came out recently called Born to Flourish, and Court is somewhere here in the audience, we tell a story of a dear friend of mine who actually was a very famous Marxist professor of sociology here at UW-Madison, and he was president of the American Sociological Association, yet, was quite an outlier among his colleagues in his political views. And he died unexpectedly at the age of 71 from a virulent kind of leukemia. And I had the honor of being with him the day before he passed away at his hospital bed in Milwaukee. And we tell this story there, and Eric was just filled with love, and he was radiating, and he knew that he was going to pass any moment, and maybe in part that was a catalyst for his flourishing. And Roshi, we've learned so much about that through your whole life's work.
Thank you. As we've been talking, I'm thinking about Rebecca Solnit's book, A Paradise Built in Hell, and how catastrophic situations like Hurricane Katrina, but we can think of so many, incites, evokes the absolute best in individuals as they turn toward saving, protecting, and rebuilding their communities. I really feel that we're in a moment, a kind of Hurricane Katrina right now, by the way. And, we're seeing the arising in the midst of dysphoria of an energy, a national, but also a global energy that is around justice and love, very much in the spirit of what Dr. King spoke to so brilliantly in the midst of the ravages of racism. So I feel extraordinarily hopeful, just as Rebecca reflects in her book, but also I've seen in my life at the individual level that actually being comfortable isn't where it's at.
Data-driven slogans.
Sorry. You get my drift. I think you do too.
Sona, anything to add?
I am noticing this feeling of like, I kind of wish we could be here for 7 hours, Simon. And I agree, Richie, in your data-based slogan that flourishing is contagious, and I feel it right on my left and my right, and also I really hope wisdom is contagious too. Wisdom.
Well, yeah. But I want to just bring up a point that you alluded to, Sona, and also you, Richie. The research has been on individuals. And as you were saying, flourishing is contagious. Yeah. I think Molly Crockett is opening up, these questions or has opened in some of her research and in her lab. So often, the work that you all are doing is, what's happening with the individual. Mm-hmm. And I really feel like the next phase is not about, individual flourishing. It really has to do with, what causes, and I'm not talking about cults, just to be very clear, being, in collective trance. But, how flourishing awakens and is transmitted and shared and expressed in communities.
Absolutely.
And, how do you, you guys are the researchers. I just wonder how you make that happen in terms of research. Sorry to take...
No, I love it.
I'm just curious.
And Richie,
Well-
you have great data to share about this.
Well, it's not exactly about this, but Roshi, you met Dalal in our center, and she is doing work on communal singing and the power that has in collective healing, particularly with populations that have been subjected to historical trauma. So I think that this is one example of this kind of communal neuroscience that we can do that I think will be very important in the future.
I was also thinking of the study that you referenced when we were at the meeting in March of the indirect effects of some of the practice, and I wondered if you wanted to speak about that.
Yeah, I mean, this really is the kind of data that supports the slogan that flourishing is contagious. And there are two data sets that we have that we're super excited about. One is work led by Matt Hirschberg in our center, along with...
Leandra?
No, that's...
Okay, sorry.
That's the other one. So I'll get to that one. But work led by Matt that was done in Louisville, Kentucky with public school teachers, where we took about 850 public school teachers and we randomly assigned them to training in a curriculum, if you will, to promote the core constituents that we think are important for human flourishing. And we had another group that was a control group that was assigned something else, not important for this. But they did this for 28 days, and it was really a minimal engagement. They were engaged for roughly 5 minutes a day for 28 days. And we found what we expected in terms of improvements in well-being and decreases in depression and anxiety in the teachers. But what was most exciting was the impact that this had on the students that they teach. And so by prior agreement with the school system, we had access to the academic records of approximately 13,000 students that were taught by these teachers. And what we found is that the performance, particularly on standardized math exams, of students who are taught by teachers randomly assigned to the flourishing training were significantly better than the math scores of kids who are taught by teachers randomly assigned to the control group. And this is kind of the holy grail of this kind of work. And it really supports this idea that flourishing is contagious. And then a second data set was done with about 2,500 healthcare providers in 7 different states in Mexico. Again, using in this case, it's a bit more intensive training in these core dimensions of flourishing. And these healthcare providers were primarily nurses and doctors, and they came from many different clinics and hospitals. And we have access to the data for how those organizations are functioning and also healthcare outcomes on the patients. And we oversampled the healthcare providers who worked in emergency departments. So what we found is that the clinics in which the healthcare providers who got the Flourishing training worked, those clinics were operating more efficiently, and in the emergency rooms, the mortality rate of patients was actually significantly less. So this is really kind of amazing and super exciting. And that study was done, Matt also contributed to that, Matt Hirschberg, and Leandro Chernikov, who I think may be in this audience. Leandro, are you here? Yes, whoa. Leandro came all the way from Mexico to this event. So So those are what Sona was referring to. So this really is the kind of evidence that we feel is going to be helpful in reaching a tipping point. And many, many years ago, a really great psychologist / economist by the name of Danny Kahneman, some of you, I'm sure, have heard of him. He is a Nobel laureate. He wrote the book Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. Danny pulled me aside. This is probably 25 years ago. And he's no longer with us today. But he said, Richie, if you really want to change the world, you better start hanging out with economists. So some of this work is collaborating with economists.
Well, and those data, Richie, they're really profound when we think about the impact that we can have on others around us and the impact, like the ripple effect that these practices can have. And particularly, I think if we kind of marry those findings with findings around the studies that we've done on the messaging around mental health or contemplative practice interventions and why do people want to engage with them. And what we find is that other focused reasons are far more motivating for people. People are interested in learning for themselves, but by far and away, they are more interested and more motivated. So, and this is a study that one of my graduate students, Joey Levy, did with college students, that the most strongly endorsed reasons for wanting to engage and participate are because I want to help my friends. Yeah. And so we have young people who are saying, I want to do this because I want to help my friends. I want to be a good friend. I want to be a good neighbor. And then we know that the practices from the work you're describing themselves have the opportunity to radiate. Mm-hmm. This is a really powerful combination.
Yeah, that's great.
I love it. I'm hoping, could each of you just in one or 2 minutes summarize a highlight or two of what we've learned from this 50 years of work on flourishing? What do we know now that we didn't know 50 years ago?
Richie, you start.
In 2 minutes.
Flourishing is a skill. It's easier than you think, and flourishing is contagious. Those 3 points are, I think, really important and are really summaries of a lot of evidence over the last 50 years.
That was less than 2 minutes, so.
I know. Can I have one of your minutes?
Please.
I think I would summarize it sort of on 2 hands. So on the one hand, we have learned that these ancient practices can alleviate the suffering that people experience in our contemporary lives today. And they can do so in ways that are that can be demonstrated through rigorous scientific studies in ways that are robust and enduring, that they last. The benefits can last long after the program or the training happens. And they're specific. And so that knowledge is profound. On the other hand, I would say we have also learned that the scientific studies that we've conducted are not enough. That even though we know all of this, people are still suffering. Mm-hmm. College students are more depressed today, at higher rates and anxious than they were 20 years ago. 1 in 5 moms are still experience depression. So what we've done with our science has been necessary, but not sufficient, I would say. And we have to reckon with that in a really deep way. And I think it's one of the reasons I, again, feel humbled and honored to be sitting between these two amazing people. Because Roshi Joan, the work that you do every day through Upaya is about how do we take that kind of knowledge and all of these practices into the settings of people's everyday lives. And Richie, the work that you have led through the center, Healthy Minds and through Humin, is really about how do we bring what we know from science into everyday people's lives. So on the one hand, we've learned so much. On the other hand, there's so much to do.
If I can just add one thing, I think that what you've said is super important. And many years ago, I had the dawning revelation that, we can get all the money in the world to do the best science in the world, and the world is, it's just not going to change in the way we aspire it to change just by sitting in the lab doing the science. And this has led to, and it's something that, Roshi, your life has really inspired me. And I call myself these days an activist scientist. I believe that if we really believe as scientists, if we believe our data, if we believe that we can actually train the mind, if we believe that flourishing is a skill, we have a moral obligation to bring it out into the world. We cannot simply be just doing our science. We need to be activists. And, I think it's like climate scientists who have reached a point where the evidence is incontrovertible, and they're not any less rigorous as scientists, but many of them have also become activists, and I think we need to do the same thing.
Hear, hear. Let's hear it. I have really nothing to add, but I'll try. I think one of the valuable things is that the science has brought a lot of people to the cushion, which is laudable. And it's that kind of validation of something that contemplatives have exercised for thousands of years. But it really has taken, if you will, modern science as a kind of way of persuading materialists that this stuff works and that it's really important, as Richie is suggesting, for well-being. Richie's also suggesting something that I know we all agree, and obviously since I didn't hear boos from the audience, that, there's an ethical dimension that is part, of course, and integral to the contemplative tradition, which is not self-directed. It is talking about not just individual flourishing or just human flourishing, but the flourishing of all beings. And when you have this realization, it becomes a moral imperative to put, to walk your science, if you will, and not just talk your science. So that's the second thing that, I think is, important for us to consider at this point, that we're in a kind of transition out of the lab into the world. That is something that you exemplifying it is going to influence a lot of people, and it is significant. But there's another thing that comes up for me, and that has to do with lineage and what I would call ground of being. You know, we can do well-being practice, which is something that has been promoted in terms of, you know, depression, trauma, and you know, all of the psychophysical ills associated with body, mind, and social complexities, you know, weighing down the human organism. But there is the ground of being perspective. What is it to be a wise person in the world today? And you know, the science has, in a way, validated well-being, the practices and interventions associated with well-being. But the science has not yet, and you know, this is a bridge right now into understanding, if you will, interdependence, or what I have termed mutual belonging. We're in a different era now. Yeah, there's plenty we can do at the individual level in terms of dispositiveness, you know, that's experienced subjectively. But our world is big. And until we understand interdependence, interbeing, mutual belonging, the science is way behind. And to bring that forward into the sort of ground of being, the wisdom dimension, I think is an imperative right now. And, you know, what, you know, you both are doing in relation to engaging the world, but the systems, you know, the economic systems, the political systems, and the you know, educational systems that produce an economy of selfishness. This is something that, you know, we're all, the three of us, and I presume most in this room, are engaged in trying to actually transform our view of what it is to oikos, this means home, you know, to actually cause our true home to flourish.
We don't have 7 hours, we have 23 minutes left. So I'd love for us to talk about the future, and I think you're painting a beautiful portrait of some of what that might look like. But would be curious to hear, we talked to Interim Chancellor Wilcott's talked about AI, we've talked about sort of bringing the lab into the field, our moral imperative. Where might this go? What are some visions of Richie's 100-year celebration? What are the stones that haven't been turned in the contemplative world? What are some of the insights that might emerge in collaboration with technology or not, from your perspectives? I don't know, Sona, if you want to start.
Yeah, that's a big question, Simon. Those are wonderful questions. You know, one of the ways in which I feel grateful for my own exposure and practice, contemplative practice, is this capacity, I would say, to like hold the both and not get pulled into extremes. And I think it's easy to get pulled into extremes when we consider the pace of the nature of the technological change in our world and the impact of AI, as you mentioned. And, you know, it's either incredible or it's disastrous. And so I think, you know, there are amazing gifts, I would say, of the impact of technology and AI in particular in our world today. The access to information and the ability to overcome what have been like persistent, pervasive, structural, you know, inequalities in terms of access to knowledge and information, I think is an amazing blessing. And at the same time, the pace of our world, the fact that you can get an instantaneous answer to any question that you ask, I think is something to really reflect upon. My teacher, Tsoknyi Rinpoche, talks a lot about the impact of speedy energy and speedy energy in the body. And a question that I hold is the pace at which change is happening. Is this access to information that we have today, is that going to give us the ability to utilize that time to connect more deeply with each other? Or is it simply going to turbocharge what is, already at a pretty high octane speediness with which people live? And I think in a lot of the research that we've done, the people's relationship to time has a really profound impact on both how they relate to themselves and to others. And so in one study, this notion of, or this construct of time pressure, like how much do you absorb that speedy energy in your body relative to what we measured as time scarcity, which is like how much available time is in your day. Time pressure is associated for students with more anxiety, more depression, and actually lower academic performance. Whereas time scarcity, which means you have fewer available hours, is associated with less depression, time, yes, and better academic performance. And so, we know this, like Richie, Roshi, you're scheduled probably from dawn until dusk. And yet when people are with you, and this is my experience also of being with His Holiness, when you're in someone's presence who's cultivated that sense of inner spaciousness rather than speediness, it's almost like time stops. And so that's a question for us as the pace of life picks up and technology accelerates to almost instantaneous levels in some cases. How will we absorb that?
Yeah. Thank you, Sona. Richie.
We are all part of a grand experiment for which none of us have provided our informed consent.
Yes.
And that's a big challenge. And I think that we really are up against a kind of challenge that we've never faced before in the history of the human race. And we know that there are studies that have been done that look at certain measures of attention, behavioral measures of attention, in youth today, and we can compare their performance to the same measures. These are tests that have been around for a long time, same measures before 50 years ago, before the internet. And there's absolutely no question that the attentional performance of youth today is dramatically impaired compared to youth 50 years ago. And so, of course, there are many factors that may influence this. This is, in the language of science, a cross-sectional design. We didn't follow people over this 50-year period. But I think most people would agree that the technology changes are likely a significant factor in causing these differences. And so I think we're really up against a huge challenge, and I don't think it's going to be easy. While I think it's important that we do whatever work we can for those who have expertise in these areas to promote increased regulation of these technologies, I think that the changes are occurring much more rapidly than any regulatory changes would repair, at least in our lifetimes. And so I think that we need to search for solutions on many different levels. And I think that, the most important thing is to simply acknowledge that we just don't know what those solutions are going to be. But one of the things that I think is going to be important is to teach our kids digital hygiene. And I really mean this very seriously. There was a study done not too long ago that found that the average American adult opens their phone 152 times a day. I think most of you would agree we don't need to open our phone 152 times a day. I think that if we begin early enough in life, children can actually regulate their attention. We know that they can regulate their attention. It's actually easy to teach kids to regulate their attention. The fact that in our education systems we don't incorporate the education of attention is a moral failing. William James, in 1890, in his book, The Principles of Psychology, has a chapter on attention, and he said in that chapter on attention that the education of attention would be the education par excellence. And he talked about how important educating attention is. And, more than 100 years have transpired since that passage was written, and we've done nothing about it in any kind of systematic way. So I think that these are areas that we really need to work on.
I think we've done something about it, Richie, and I think the people sitting with you have been part of that, truly. Yeah, I think we know a lot more about the benefits of regulating attention than we did in 1890. Yeah. What about I'm watching the clock, and I have a closer question, but this isn't it, so. What are some
Wait.
Okay, please.
I just want to put it in, 1 cent, not 2 cents on AI. Because I think, we've talked about attention. We've talked also about the sense of time and how, as things speed up, we know from complex adaptive systems that, information drops out. One of the things that I feel we don't talk enough about in relation to the AI situation, which, by the way, I have an appreciation like I appreciate the mountain lion who appeared next to my cabin as I showed them, the films of that earlier. Beautiful, fascinating, lethal. Anyone who wants to see it, I'll be in the reception afterward. It's on my iPhone. Yes, thank you so much. I was 4 feet from it, piece of glass between me and it. But, I think what we're working with here, as you say, there's many unknowns. But there's one thing that I am really interested in, and that is how AI is depleting the capacity for imagination. So I just, drop this into our thinking. There's many things that can be said about this extraordinary emergence, at a pace where ethics is irrelevant because it's power and, economically driven. But, my concern has to do with imagination at this point. There are many other questions, though, so I just dropped that in.
And I would say, these 3 answers are deeply interconnected.
Yeah.
Imagination, attention, pace, speed, the ability to just have time to linger and wander. And so there's a lot there.
Another one.
I just want to add one thing.
I want to add one. I got another one.
I think that, I know some people, some of whom are in this audience, who really creatively use AI in a way that complements their imagination. And I would say in these cases, it actually supplements and increases their imagination. And there's actually data on this.
You always say that, but I'm not always convinced.
You want to see it?
So I think it really depends on how we use it, on our relationship to it, and so I think it's a very, enormously complex tool, and I think at this stage it's so early on that we haven't learned to use it in the right kind of ways. But I do have some sense of optimism and possibility that if it's used in the right way, it actually can be an enhancer, not a detractor.
No, I agree. I'm not a detractor only. Longer conversation for another time.
Okay, you ready for our closer?
Okay.
Thank you all. This has been amazing to speak with you and hear your tales and your love fest. Okay, so if a 25-year-old wanted to give the next 25 or 50 years of their life to this work, I'm thinking of myself as a 25-year-old when I found a Mind and Life dialogue book in a bookstore in Dharamsala and first read about you, Richie, and never could have imagined being here on the stage with you some years later. So if we're talking to that 25-year-old, where would the three of you tell them to point their life? And maybe we can kind of go down the line and hear your answers to that question.
I would say two things. I'd say, one, stay the course. Do not lose heart. That, I think, is, the sort of this kind of dedication to hold life as precious, and that we have been given this lifetime to do the best we can to mitigate unhappiness and suffering for others and other beings and our world. But the other thing is to ask the really hard questions from an ethical foundation. In other words, integrity is essential as we move forward into a world where there's a rampant lack of thereof. And that actualizing deep questions with integrity at this point and staying the course and doing it with each other. That's the prescription that I just could think of at this moment.
I love that so much, Roshi. Thank you. It reminds me, for I guess the last 20 years, I have given like a brief lecture overview and welcome to prospective graduate students who come to our program to learn about the program and interview. And I think I've used the same slide for the last 20 years, which is a quote by Hart Thurman, the American theologian and civil rights leader, which is don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and do it, because what the world needs are people who have come alive.
And are doing it.
Yeah, and are doing it. And so I stand by the importance of that quote. And, I think there are two pieces that follow from that. One is, as you're saying, like asking the questions and asking the hard questions, asking what makes you come alive. And then the other is cultivating the skills to listen to what the answers are. And that's where, for me, having the integration of a contemplative practice with the kind of work that I do has been so important in strengthening that capacity to listen inside and also listen to what's happening around me. So ask the questions, learn to listen, and then find incredible mentors who will be guides and will continue to inspire you through the work that they do and the light that they shine. So with that, I'll hand it to you, Richie.
One thing that has been so important in my own life, which I would certainly communicate to a 25-year-old who's just starting, is to listen to your heart. And don't be too influenced by forces around you telling you what to do. If I did that when I was young, I would have led a really boring life. So I think that that's one thing. And another that I think is really important is not to be afraid of saying you don't know. And it's much better to say you don't know than to try to make up something that sort of sounds like you do know. I think that in science there is too much of the latter and too little of the former. We've certainly made a lot of progress in many different areas of science, but one of the things that I often reflect on, I was talking about this today to a friend who is here for this event. There's been more than 100 years of research on looking at the brain mechanisms that underlie our consciousness, our experience. And I think if we're really honest with ourselves, I think we would say that really there's been zero progress made in answering that question in the last 100 years. When are we prepared to accept the null hypothesis?
Well, that's the perfect ending. We're on time. Gasp.
Well, we're so lucky that, Richie, you didn't listen to that bad advice and you led a very interesting life, and we are so grateful for everything that you've done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all. Thank you.